Just waiting for this to go live. Here we go. I think it's ready. It's 3 o'clock here, or 3:30, I should say. I'm David for BigBits, and we are going to be doing some TA today on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and some other crypto assets here. And today is June 28th. We are nearing the end of the monthly candle for June of 2021. So there's some interesting things to look forward to here, but I want to go ahead and zoom in and we'll take a look at the daily. Let me get my studio set up over here where I need it. Okay, so this is our daily chart. You can see we've got pretty well intact downtrend here. And honestly, about the only thing you can see just by looking at this, well, not the only thing, but there's several things you can see just by looking at this, just a quick glance, is that there's a very well-established downward channel here. And if anything, this was a fake out for a breakout. Let's go ahead and take a look at some lines here and show you what I kind of see. The first thing when I look at this chart, something kind of like this. I mean, that bottom one obviously isn't lined up very well. I've got the snap thing on here, but something kind of like this is what you're seeing for the most part. We quickly broke above that, and then quickly the channel reclaimed that. This is just general price action. It obviously doesn't include the wick, so you could probably interpret this many different ways, but that's kind of what I see. But more importantly, you also see the moving averages acting as resistance. We didn't get back up to the mid Bollinger Band, which is 20 period SMA. And then we also, once we finally broke that, we got back up above it, but it could not hold as support. So it was not doing too good for us here. Now, if you have any questions for chat, just let me know. It's been a while since I've done videos. I'm not sure how many people are actually going to stop by, but if you have a question, you can either leave a chat here while I'm live or send me a message on Twitter, because I'm really bad about reading the comments after I post the videos anymore, just because my schedule's so crazy. But let's get into a little bit of the TA on the Bitcoin daily chart. I'm going to zoom in so you can see, of course, we're in this sort of downward channel below the moving averages. Moving averages are still heading down aside from the 200. I'll explain that to you in just a moment. This is our stochastic advanced oscillator here, which very neutral right now. If anything, it's hinting at a potential reversal back downwards, which is something to keep an eye on. But what is good right now is we have this potential change in trend on the RSI, and also this potential change in trend on the MACD. This is pretty important because this is when a lot of big moves happen when it comes to the MACD, is when you get these change in trends around the neutral area. Big moves around here can often lead to sideways pushes. So let's zoom back out here. So you can see the price dropped, and you can see there was a crossover here, which if you have a crossover on the MACD, you would assume that's bullish. But since the crossover was so low, a lot of times what happens is the price just kind of ranges sideways as the indicator resets. And as the indicators do, well, at least with the MACD, it tends to, on sideways action, go back to its neutral state at zero, as if the price was the same every single day. And the moves in this area closer to zero, I have found in my experience, to produce the bigger, more I guess higher percentage moves. So that's pretty important to take a look at here. There is potential. There is a little bit of hope, and mixed with the previous 2 days price action and a little bit of price action, which is been really well today and yesterday, well, the last 3 days now for Ethereum, it's potentially really good. Now, one thing I want to show you is the moving averages. You can see I have the ghost trails on here, which show you when the last candle is that gets calculated into the moving average. So you can see starting here, none of these candles behind that are included in the mid Bollinger Band calculation. So when you go in, you can see this value is getting dropped next and replaced with whatever the next value would be. So take a look at the 50-day moving average here. And I'm very confident this is going to start leveling out. And if we can get price back above it, it could turn flat. And I can show you, because we are going to be replacing these values, these higher price values here, with these lower price values. The reason this is going to flatten out is because there is a huge difference between this price and the current price. If you replace a value back here with the value where we're at now, it's a very similar price from here to here. So the moving average is not going to move so substantially from one point to the next on the chart. So that's something to keep in mind as to when you can kind of start forecasting when a moving average is going to level off. But you also have to consider that this is a downtrend. It's very clear there's no support on the moving averages right now. Absolutely none on the key moving averages. So you have to keep in mind that there's the possibility it can continue to go down. But also note that the likelihood is much greater that the moving average will flatten out as opposed to move straight back up. And that should be pretty self-evident because price action has been pretty sideways for the last while. That's part of the thing that you need to recognize when it comes to trying to forecast these moving averages and how they might impact things is what data are you removing and replacing it with, and how will that impact the moving average itself. Now, this is very hard to do with like exponential moving averages and other types of moving averages, but a simple moving average is very straightforward on how you can interpret these. Now, taking a look here at the 50-day, let's zoom out and let's go back into the 4-hour chart, and you can get a very similar picture here. Oh, look at this. That channel I drew. Isn't that great? That seems to be working out really well. So yeah, that did look like a solid fake out. But you can see on the 4-hour how this is starting to flatten out here as these smaller resolutions are getting caught up in this neutral sort of sideways, somewhat downward momentum. You can see a very similar thing here is that we have our 200 goes all the way back to here, and you can see that it has started to slope less downward than it was before because the price has been moving sideways more so over the last 200 candles. Now, the farther we get into this, the higher the chances are that you can reclaim that as support, because the moving average should be easier to break if it's flatter and should be able to hold as support better than if you were to try and break through it like right here. That's one thing you'll notice a lot, or something that I have noticed a lot. Of course, no financial advice here. But when you break through a key moving average that is still moving down at a pretty steady incline, it's very hard to hold as support. And if it does hold as support, it often doesn't hold multiple times. It's hard to reclaim a key moving average as support the very first attempt. I should say that, particularly when the momentum and the slope of the moving average is so far downhill. And you can see this is going to only continue to get more flat as long as we trade in this range. And let me draw another line. Actually, I think a rectangle might be better here. Where are those things? I don't usually do a whole lot of drawing, actually. Rectangle. Let's see. That's an ugly rectangle. I apologize. But as long as the price continues to stay within this rectangle, this sort of range, it's going to continue to draw in the moving average as we move forward because all the price is within the rectangle. It's just pretty common sense. $65,000 top back in the summer. I call that. Yeah, I've done pretty well here lately. I think a lot of that, I don't know, I'd probably have to go back to those videos. I usually don't think about these things too much after I've done them. I usually make my predictions and stick with them. But I think the point is pretty clear here on Bitcoin and how we might be having this potential for the actual bottom to be setting in. But I did want to zoom out to the 1 month there, X Factor. This is the daily. Let's slowly zoom out to the month. Let's start here with 5 days. And if you've been following me on Twitter, you'll see that I had said that the 5-day chart was telling you a little bit more, and that there was a little bit of support around that area, and we finally bounced off of it. But then, like the 200-day average, it folded. But look at Ethereum. This is why I have them side by side, because these two definitely drive the market. The 55-day, which is the 200-day, or 250-day, I believe, yeah. The 250-day here is holding as support on Ethereum. And Ethereum has a very well intact bull trend, and so does Bitcoin on these larger time frames. Let's go out to the 1 week, and then we'll go back to the month. So the weekly is still very safe on Bitcoin. Ethereum, not so much. We'll take a look at the altcoin chart as well, because I did also predict that we were going to have a sell-off on the Altcoin Dominance. One thing to look at on this chart that I did want to mention was the RSI. The RSI has reset to a neutral area, and that's what I call this kind of steady, slow decrease in the RSI to about the neutral area is a reset. You have the chance now. The RSI is getting very close to breaking through here. A lot of people actually do chart on the RSI, so let's take a look at that. What something like that would look like. So you're pretty close to having a potential RSI breakout in the next coming weeks. July, August could be a good month. That's something else to look at. You notice though the MACD is still kind of slowly resetting down there, so it could take a little bit longer. Although I was kind of excited about this potential crossover here on the stochastic oscillator, that it did not play out. We really didn't have enough momentum for that. Now let's see. The reason I called 65,000, I tell you, I'm gonna have to go back and watch the video, but I was pretty close on that estimate. I was thinking anywhere from 2 to 3 times the value, and I looked at the of the previous all-time high. Excuse me. And then I was looking at the extension of where the oscillator would take it, I believe. So let me actually go back to the 4-hour, and we'll zoom back out here. No. This has to be the daily. There's no way I could have predicted that on the 4-hour. I think it was probably around here I made that prediction. You know, I honestly don't remember. Like I said, I'd have to go back and check those videos, but just watching the momentum on different resolutions is what's key. If you don't watch different resolutions, you're going to get caught trading and stuck on one particular, and you'll probably enter into a bad trade, especially if you're looking at smaller time frames like 1 minute, 5 minute, even 15 minute. If you're trading hourly and 4-hour charts, I think you have a better chance of making a better trade, especially if you look even further out. So if you're trading a 1 minute chart, you need to look all the way back at the 4-hour and the 1 day chart to get a better idea of where the momentum is going. Because if you pick the wrong side and the momentum on the daily chart is against you, you could get really hammered. And it's just kind of how it is. All right, let's go back out to the monthly, because I did want to talk about this one. Zoom in. You can kind of ignore the little drawings here. They're not really meant for the monthly. Here, there's not a whole lot to talk about, but one thing that's very common is we get sort of a double peak on oscillator type indicators, and we have not had a double peak. So for example, you'll see something very similar to what we saw on Ethereum back in 2017 here. My head's in the way. If I can move. This is probably where you can see it now. But yeah, you can see there's like a double peak here. You'll get this a lot. People call them twin peaks. Let's just go to the 4-hour. We might see something like this a little bit easier here. Or something oversold or overbought. Yeah, so you kind of want to see a bearish divergence set up for Bitcoin on the monthly chart, if you want to call the cycle top. I believe, and I believe many other people believe, that it got a little bit ahead of itself in the cycle, and there was really no reset during it. And a lot of people, I know Data Dash also kind of agrees that this is a mid-cycle correction. I kind of believe that. Of course, nobody knows, but I do think it's very likely we see sort of a twin peak here. You kind of got one back here with this data. Let's go to BLX, and then I'll answer your question there. On the macro charts with stock to flow, well, no, I don't. I kind of glance at them occasionally, but not really. So the difference, a big difference between this cycle and the previous one is that we did kind of have a couple of peaks. We had one run up and this kind of casual growth into that huge bubble in 2017. This year, I'm not sure you count this one. That was back in 2019. We had a fairly good reset and a big run up. Do we have another reset and another big run up? Let's go back to the 2013 cycle here. So this one, I think, looks a lot more familiar compared to the 2017 cycle, and a lot of people are making this comparison, and I can see why. You look at the oscillator here, see this big run up, and that was a huge move, absolutely gigantic. Your oscillator's really high up here, your RSI is really high, but you get this quick correction downward over a couple of months, 3 to 4 months here. You start to regain your value, but look where it is on that huge move. That is what happens when you look at the math on these indicators. The math makes it very easy for these things to drop despite having large gains after these peaks. So it's very heavily biased at some points with the different oscillators. The point is, this is kind of what I'm looking for, because this is what the chart kind of looks like right now. Take a look at this. You know, we got very, very much overbought. It wasn't crazy overbought. It wasn't above 90, but it did cross down rather quickly for a few months period, and then it rebounded, but it didn't even get back to overbought. But it still, went 4 or 5x. So that's what we're kind of looking at here, is what I'm thinking. You went overbought. You went very overbought, actually, and you're going to have this correction. It could end this month. It could end after the next month. But what I am looking for is that potential bounce, creating that bearish divergence that will create the bear market. So I've gotten several questions about the stock to flow before, and I think it's a silly model. They've kind of changed the model up over time slightly to kind of fit their agenda, but it has played very well with what we have now. But for it to continue for more than a decade, like, the entire monetary system will have to break. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think you're going to have, $100 million Bitcoin. If you follow out the stock to flow, it's going to get some really crazy levels in the price versus the dollar. I'm trying to find it online on the other screen here. And it's always funny because whenever you look at it, it doesn't ever go beyond 2030. So you can see we're right here with the stock to flow. 31,000, I think is the most recent data point. We're well below the stock to flow, and this could very well continue to hold. But you can see after the next halving, it's calling for 1 million, which means it's very likely that the price, and I hate when I do that. I hate these types of charts, but reset those axes. All right, so I hate that the Y or the x-axis ends us here in 2028, because you look at it, this is taking log steps. So you go from pretty much 10,000 to 100,000, and you go from 100,000 to 1 million. Where does it go after 1 million? 10 million. Where does it go after 10 million? 100 million. Where does it go after 100 million? 1 billion. I mean, that would be what, 2040, 2042, something like that. A $1 billion Bitcoin by 2042. That's ridiculous. I don't really care for the stock to flow over time like that. And if they change it, they change it, but not a fan long term. Although this and like rainbow charts, they do kind of give you a bit of perspective on where things could potentially line up. So take a look at moonmath.win. This was probably the most popular in my opinion, but even with these rainbow charts, you still get these anomalies where you go well above the rainbow, and this one rode the very bottom of it. We peaked below it here. Yeah, so if this is the midline and these are decreasing over time, look at where the bubble tops out on each of these. You know, the peak of the cycle, we barely hit the, I don't know what color that is. It's whatever's, I guess that's a red-orange, because it's right next to orange, and that looks more like a red. But it only gets to here. And in this cycle, we got to this yellow. That's 3 levels below that one. It very well could be that one. But even if we just get back up to where we were by the end of the year, that's looking at $100,000 by the end of the year if price just gets back up to the top of this first yellow section here. If you get back up to the orange, which is 2 levels below the previous cycle top by the end of the year, that's looking at something like 150, I believe. And I know this is really hard to see. This is my resolution's really large, but I do believe these give you kind of an idea of where things are going. But they're definitely nothing you need to follow closely. So let's get out of BLX. I wanted to take a look at 1 minus BTC.D, which is the altcoin dominance. This is the inverse of the Bitcoin dominance. And here we go. This is the monthly chart. Let's take it back down to the daily. If you watched, I think it was my last live stream, look at these lines I drew. Isn't that great? I pretty much did call the top over here on that one. Everything was getting pretty euphoric. I mean, I'm not going to say I called the exact top. I had no idea when it was going to top, but that was kind of what I expected, is we would come down over a period of weeks while the price of both crept downwards, or Bitcoin increased quicker than alts, and alts kind of stayed at their same level. It turns out they both went down. It's just that the alts went down way more. I think we could be at a bit of a turning point, and the reason I believe this is very much kind of a fundamental take on altcoin dominance. We continue to see more crypto projects. There is only one Bitcoin. For Bitcoin to maintain these huge levels of dominance like we used to see, it would be quite a feat, because there are all of these new projects it's competing against. It's not Bitcoin versus Ethereum and a few others. It's Bitcoin versus infinity. You can make as many coins as you want. So this chart could very well be the opposite of how it was before, to where Bitcoin had all of the dominance to where it has very little in the future. It's just my fundamental take, and I don't see any way around it. As we continue to get more and more larger blockchains, larger projects that use these blockchains, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be its own protocol, but I do see alt dominance gaining very much, and I do see it setting a new all-time high. And it's another reason why I don't believe the cycle is over for Bitcoin and crypto in general this year, period, is because we didn't set a new all-time high for alts. Alts did not hit the mark. Bitcoin did not hit the mark. Nothing got up to where people kind of expected it to. I expected $6,000 Ethereum by the end of the cycle, and then I kind of changed my mind, and I actually increased that. It didn't even make it to my first target. It didn't make it to most people's first target, and the dominance didn't even break. The alt dominance didn't even break the previous all-time highs. That leads me to think that there's no way that we are at the end of the cycle. this is probably my firmest evidence that I have that the cycle is not over, is that alt did not reclaim dominance, a new all-time high dominance, because like I mentioned, on the very fundamental basis of there are just way more, this is inevitable that these are going to hit all-time highs versus Bitcoin as long as crypto is popular. And I don't see crypto not being popular, especially with the emergence of NFTs, projects like Top Shot, where people are actually using crypto on a day-to-day basis, even if it's just NFTs and not actually using Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything to transfer value. They're starting to use it whether they realize it or not, and I don't see any way this cycle ends without a new all-time high in alt dominance. I just don't. That's my very fundamental take on why the market cycle is not over just yet. But let's see, what else is there to look at? I mean, I've been looking mostly at Bitcoin, and then we look at Bitcoin versus alts, but let's actually switch this back over to a single chart. This and switch it over to Ethereum. And if you've been with me the whole video, pretty much everything is the same. Once you take a look at Bitcoin, you kind of have an idea for how the market's going. The weekly chart for Ethereum is very similar, but it seems to be playing a few weeks behind Bitcoin. We could have that potential oscillator crossover. You have that potential RSI trend change coming, but the MACD is still firmly in a downtrend here. It does not look like it's ready to reset, so that's something to keep an eye on. I'm not ready to call a bottom here on anything, but I also haven't really sold anything. I sold, for transparency, I sold all of my, what was it, Matic. I bought a bunch of it around a penny. Not a penny. Maybe a penny and a half, something like that. I loaded up on it last year. It made it all the way up to 90 cents, and it even doubled that. It might even went higher, and it might have went up towards $2. But I sold a bunch of it around 90 cents because it was crazy. I had to take profit. So I have taken some profit, but I haven't sold any of my other positions because none of my other positions have met their target. Like I said, with Ethereum, I was kind of expecting something like 6,000. I think 5,000 was probably the most conservative target. I believe it is a cycle behind Bitcoin. And far as its multiples on its profits between each of those cycles. So if you go back in history and you look at Bitcoin, the multiples from low to high, from the bear market to the next bull market, decrease over time. And Ethereum did an absolutely crazy number on the last one. It went from a few bucks, right? Something like that, like 30, 40 bucks to 1,500. It was probably just a few bucks. What was it back here? Yeah, like 10, 15 bucks, all the way up to 1,300. So then it went from 100 up to 4,400. So it went 44x. Here it went over 100x. You know, maybe that is the top. I don't know. I just don't think the other alts really show that. Let's take a look at basic attention token. This is one that I've kind of held on to as well. This actually looks really good. You know, it's got the moving averages where it needs to be. They're all trending upward. It's hitting some support here potentially. Go on the daily, see what we got. This is very similar to the Bitcoin chart. And this is something you can also tell when you look at various different charts. Look at this range. This is very similar to that downtrend that we saw on the Bitcoin chart at the start of the video. To where we could be nearing a breakout upwards. Price doesn't usually tend to just kind of draw downward. If you look at the, what is it, the handy chart or whatever it is, where it shows you all the different chart patterns, you'll notice these descending wedges or triangles or whatever are typically pretty bullish because price has a hard time continuing to move down like this for very long periods of time. So if you see this in a bunch of charts, that's kind of just a general way to look at the entire alt market. So let's take a look at Uni, see if it has something very similar. It does, except it actually looks like it could go back even further. Uni is very similar. Take a look at Link. Very similar. You look at all these alts, the chart looks pretty much the same. It's pretty wild. Let's take a look at BNB, because it's been pretty wild. I've gotten a lot of alerts for it, but it's very similar as well. Although you can potentially look at these charts and say, yeah, I see a triangle downwards, which could very well be bearish. So something to keep an eye on. But BNB does show you a little bit different view because it's showing you support on the 200-day for BNB. Something to keep an eye on. Let's look at Crow. This one looks pretty rough. This one looks more rough than most of them. But this one is very volatile. I don't know if you've paid attention to Crow for very long, but it does get very volatile. Look at this. Although it does look like we're at a pretty key area here. What was the other one I've been looking at lately? I've been buying pretty often Link, Uni, Crow, and just Ethereum lately. That's the other one. But yeah. I think that's about it for the video. Pretty much everything looks all the same. Every once in a while I'll take a look at stocks like AT&T here. You know, you can also see the point I made earlier about the moving average catching up. This is a 200-day moving average. Look, it goes all the way back to September of 2020. It takes forever for the stock market to move. This is why I like crypto so much better. These moving averages take forever to recover. And there was some pretty big news on AT&T where they're like reducing the dividend in the future, but at the same time they're splitting and giving you ownership in a new company they're creating, something like that. And I don't really follow it all that closely on my stocks. It's funny because stocks are more just for fun for me, and crypto is much more serious investment because I understand crypto much better. So look, what's the other dividend stock that I play around with? IRM. Very nice trend on it. It's hard to believe you could have been buying this for 20 to 25 bucks for a few months, and it pays 62-cent dividend. And the reason I like the dividend stocks for my long-term investments are that they pay for themselves. Over the course of, what was it, 10 years or less, you end up getting a free stock just for holding one. So you double your stock holding over 10 years just by holding one stock. It's pretty cool, but it definitely doesn't give you the type of gains that crypto does, at least from my experience. I want to take a look at Doge. This is one of the big ones I haven't gotten to look at yet. Now this is a really nice chart. This is very clean chart. Look at the key moving average to the 200-day. It had a nice bounce from there. It's got some very clean resistances on those moving averages. It could very well be coming back down. I would keep an eye on Doge. This is very similar to the Bitcoin chart as far as the indicators down. Well, shoot. I think my head was in the way. But this is very similar to the Bitcoin chart as far as the indicators go. The stochastic oscillator looks like it could be getting ready to flip downward, but the RSI trend has started moving up, and you have that potential neutral zone MACD switch, which could be really good. So, like I said, I think we're nearing a very decisive point for the market in general. And the fact that we haven't even come close to retesting the all-time highs is kind of odd. It would lead me to think that we will have a bullish break at some point, and if not, you get something very similar to this on the general markets, to where it just flushes tons of people out. We've had some stuff to where it's flushed people out, and there has been some capitulation on Bitcoin, but it hasn't been nearly as severe as that, I believe. The bottom has been fairly well defended. And if you're looking for some hope, I've already talked about these indicators like the MACD, that crossover, the potential RSI trend change, and the oscillator. But one thing I also like to take a look at, which I don't really reference a whole lot, are the upper and bottom Bollinger Bands. Back here, if you followed me on Twitter, I posted that this is screaming for a bear trap, because once this candle opened and the Bollinger Band pretty much stayed flat, that was to me screaming a bear trap. Very rarely do you have this long, prolonged upward trend on the bottom band on a dip like this just to see it go straight back down. What typically happens, from my experience, is that it comes up and then you get either a fake out down here, or it comes back up straight to the midline and bounces between them down here, and then either moves up or back down, which it kind of did. It gave you that fake out, and went back up to the midline, back down, back above it, and back down. You get, after these big moves, you'll notice this, it kind of squeezes into a log, and kind of like an area here, it kind of looks like it's pooping. It's kind of gross, but that's kind of what it looks like. It's just shooting out this really thin line here to where the price action narrows, and then you get a bigger move. And that, of course, when you look at the math on the indicators, is because we're between these bands. We're trading here in this range. So this is why we always look at different time frames. Whew. I think I'm done with the video. I've been on here for quite a while. This has been a good video. I finally got to do some TA with you all. And again, if you have any questions, go ahead and send me a message or just tweet at me on Twitter. I do get notifications on there. I haven't checked Discord in months. It's hard to keep up with, and I'm really not too involved with it. We'll see where we get with that in the future. I have several classes going on right now that I'm teaching. Got more scheduled for the fall. It's unfortunate. It kind of takes away from time here, but the teaching provides more for my family, so I do that. I still like to make content here, so if you all appreciate it, just leave a like on the video and subscribe, because I'm going to try my hardest to do more videos with some TA in it, especially when it's pertinent, and I think we're at a potential very important area like today, where I'm telling you we are at this potential key point to where we can break out and regain some of these moving averages as support. And also, when there's important things going on in price, where I can show you why the moving average forecasts the way it does, and why I expect price to stay neutral, go sideways, dump, or jump in price just based off of the tail end of the moving average, not necessarily the current values. So that is it for now. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Again, you can go through the whole spiel again, but just, like the video, share it if you want to, subscribe, and I'll see you all around. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.